The air inside the Teft farmhouse was thick with the scent of wood smoke and the sharp, salty chill that always crept in from the Narragansett Bay during the January thaws. Mary moved quietly, her joints aching slightly from the damp cold, as she ladled a steaming portion of pottage into a wooden bowl. She walked toward the small sleeping chamber, the floorboards groaning under her weight. "John," she called softly, her voice raspy from the morning air. "The porridge is hot. You'll need the strength if you're heading to the mill today." She pushed the door open, but the words died in her throat. The heavy wool blankets were tossed aside, the linen sheets already cooling in the draft. The bed was empty. Mary set the bowl down on a side trunk, her heart giving a strange, uneven thump. It wasn't like John to slip away without a word. Not at his age, and certainly not during these restless times. She hurried back into the main room where Samuel was pulling on his heavy leather boots. "Samuel," she said, her voice tight. "Your father, he isn't in his bed. Did he speak to you of early business?" Samuel looked up, his brow furrowed. "No, Mother. I thought he was still resting. His boots are gone." Mary checked the hearthside. The space where John's sturdy walking shoes usually sat was vacant. A heavy silence fell between them. In 1676, a man didn't just wander off into the Rhode Island winter without cause. "Go," Mary urged, her hand trembling slightly as she gripped the back of a chair. "Ask the neighbors. Someone must have seen which path he took." Samuel didn't need to be told twice. He spent the better part of the day traversing the rugged trails of Aquidneck Island. He stopped at the common lands, hailed men hauling timber, and knocked on the doors of the families near the Portsmouth lines. At the edge of a frozen meadow, he finally found a lead. An old farmer, breath hitching in the cold, leaned on his fence. "I, Samuel. I saw a man of your father's stature just as the sun was graying the sky. He was walking with a steady pace, heading west toward the ferry landing. Looked as though he had his mind set on Kingston." Another neighbor confirmed the sight. A lone figure on foot, silhouetted against the morning mist, moving toward the mainland where the family's ancestral ties ran deep. Samuel started his journey home as the light began to fail, his face frozen from the wind. Mary was waiting by the window, the firelight casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. She didn't speak. She just looked out toward the dark silhouette of the trees, the bowl of porridge still sitting cold and untouched on the chamber trunk, wondering what urgent call from the mainland had pulled her husband out into the winter dawn. The day had been long for young Peter, tucked away from the biting Rhode Island wind. Inside the sturdy timber walls of the Teft home, his aunts had kept him close, the heavy vellum pages of the family Bible open on the table. Between the rhythmic reading of the Psalms, they had distracted him with indoor games, wooden tops and nine men's Morris, trying to keep the boy's mind from wandering toward the empty chair by the hearth where his grandfather usually sat. But Peter was restless. Every time the wind rattled the window pane or a floorboard creaked, he looked toward the door, his ears strained for the heavy, familiar thud of John's walking stick. As the gray light of the winter afternoon began to fail, the heavy oak latch finally clicked. A rush of salt-tinged, freezing air swept into the hallway, carrying with it the scent of wet wool and wood smoke. Samuel stepped inside. His face flushed a deep, wind-burned red from his trek across Aquidneck Island. Peter didn't wait for his aunts to finish their verse. He scrambled up from the rug, his small boots thumping against the floorboards as he sprinted toward the mudroom. "Samuel!" he cried out. Samuel barely had time to brace himself before Peter launched into the air. He caught the boy in a practiced, weary embrace, pulling him tight against his cold coat. Peter clutched at Samuel's shoulders, his voice high and urgent, cutting through the quiet murmur of the house. "Did you find him? Where is grandfather? Is he coming home for supper?" Samuel looked over the boy's head. His mother, Mary, was standing in the kitchen doorway, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped them on her apron. The aunts had fallen silent in the parlor, the candlelight flickering against the open Bible. Samuel let out a long, frosty breath and tightened his grip on Peter. "He was seen, lad," he said, his voice low and steady despite the exhaustion. Old Man Hazard saw him on foot near the ferry landing at dawn. He's headed back toward Kingston, back toward the old lands. Peter pulled back, his brow furrowed in confusion. On foot? All the way there? He's got a stout heart, Peter, Samuel whispered, though his eyes met Mary's with a look of shared concern. The house felt suddenly larger and colder. As the aunts moved to close the Bible and prepare the evening meal, the family gathered around the fire, the empty seat at the head of the table a silent reminder of the patriarch walking through the winter mist, following a path only he seemed to understand. The fire in the hearth roared, fueled by the heavy oak logs Samuel had hauled in, but it was Peter's voice that truly warmed the drafty room. He stood in the center of the kitchen, his small chest puffed out with a sudden, fierce conviction that only a child can muster. "Grandfather went to find my father," Peter declared, his eyes shining in the firelight. "He's gone to bring him home safe. I know it. That is why he walked so fast toward the ferry." The room went still for a heartbeat. Samuel looked at his mother, Mary, whose hand stayed frozen over the cooling pottage. They both knew the shadows that hung over the road to Kingston, the whispers of war and the bitter January frost. But Peter's hope was a shield they weren't ready to break. "And when they walk through that door," Peter continued, pointing a determined finger at the heavy oak latch, "Grandmother and I will fix them a grand dinner, the biggest they've ever seen." A small, weary smile finally broke across Mary's face. She reached out, smoothing Peter's hair with a trembling hand. "A grand dinner indeed, Peter," she whispered. "We shall not let them go hungry for a second." In the parlor, Aunt Mary and Aunt Tabitha closed the heavy Bible, the somber weight of the afternoon lifting as they caught the boy's spirit. "We shall help also," Aunt Tabitha said, her voice regaining its strength. "Mary and I will fix them their favorite foods. We'll start the johnnycakes on the stone and get the slow roasted venison simmering in the great pot until the windows steam up so thick we can't see the snow. And the honey bread," Aunt Mary added, already moving toward the larder. "We'll bake it until the crust is dark and sweet, just the way your father likes it." Peter jumped up and down, the floorboards thumping in rhythm with his excitement. "And we will play games all night. No more lessons, no more sitting still. We'll play fox and geese and the card games grandfather taught us, and we won't let them go to sleep until they've told us every story from the road." For a few hours, the fear of the winter mist was pushed back by the clatter of pewter plates and the savory scent of herbs filling the house. The aunts bustled about the kitchen, their shadows dancing large against the walls, as they prepared a feast fit for heroes, waiting, watching, and praying for the sound of 2 sets of boots on the porch. After Peter settled down for bed, Mary opened her journal and began to write.
The morning light was cold and thin. The hearth was gray and low. When Mary found the empty bed and the boots that chose to go, no word was left upon the latch, no footprint in the hall, just the winter wind on Portsmouth's neck, and the silence of it all. "Where has he gone?" she asked the air, as Samuel grabbed his coat to seek the truth on island trails and the ferry's icy boat. From farm to dock the question flew, through mist and salt and spray. Has any seen John Teff's tall frame pass by this bitter day? A neighbor spoke of early light, a traveler on the road, a man who walked with steady pace, beneath a heavy load. He's headed back to Kingston's soil. The word came drifting back, to the old lands and the family ties, along the frozen track. Inside the house, the candles flickered, the Bible pages turned, while Peter sat with aunts so kind, as the midday embers burned. But when the door swung open wide, and Samuel stepped within, the boy leapt up with sudden joy, and a light beneath his skin. He went to find my father, Sam, to bring him safely home, to guide him through the great swamps chill, and the forests dark and loam. And when they reach this heavy door, the feast will be so grand, the finest meal that's ever been in all of Rhodes' fair land. Aunt Mary, fetch the honey bread. Aunt Tabitha, the dear, will steam the windows white and thick until the ghosts all disappear. We'll pile the plates and stoke the fire and play our games all night. till every shadow in the woods is put to sudden flight. So in the house on Aquidneck's shore, they turn the sorrow round, with the scent of herbs and roasted meat, and a hopeful, happy sound, waiting for the double knock, the boots upon the floor, and the love that leads a weary man back through his own front door.